This is the She Dares to Travel podcast, and I am your host, Raquella Pollock. After spending a decade managing the #1 travel agency in Canada and now working with tourism businesses in risk management, I am here to connect you with women who are taking the travel industry by storm, as well as business professionals with a passion for travel, just like me. We are here to inspire, motivate, and uplift you to not only follow, but plan out your dreams, no matter where in the world they may be. Be sure to leave a review, subscribe, and follow along. Welcome back, all you daredevils. We are here today talking about something that I absolutely love, which is all things aviation. I have a wonderful guest joining us from Germany today, Raja Katz, who has graduated from flight school in 2014 and started flying for a European airline the same year. So far, she's worked for 3 different airlines, including both low-cost and premium carriers. She has 10 years of experience flying the Airbus A320, so cool, which is a 170-seat aircraft that goes on medium and short haul routes. But soon she is going to be flying the A350, which is an even larger aircraft to destinations all over the world. On top of that, with her busy schedule as a commercial airline pilot, she also is a huge advocate for greater visibility and representation of women in commercial aviation through her Instagram, Raya in the Sky. She also mentors and motivates future pilots by answering questions and just sharing her day-to-day life about what it's like up at the pointy end of the plane in the cockpit, which is so fascinating to me. And I'm just thrilled to chat with you today, Raya. Thank you for taking the time.
Hello, Raquella. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and thanks for the warm welcome.
Anytime. Anytime. So you are in Germany right now. Have you always been living there?
Yes, I was born and raised in Germany in the Rhine region, which is the western part of Germany. And I've always lived here, except for a couple of months during my flight training, which I spent in the US, in Arizona, actually, which was pretty fun too. So yeah, I'm German, and I've always been based here.
Beautiful. I've heard Germany is gorgeous with so many different areas to go, very lush forests.
It is very versatile, I think, but I mean, you're in Canada. What can I say?
It's beautiful here
You'll
too.
always win on that. Yeah.
It's beautiful here. So growing up in Germany, how had travel impacted your life? Did you travel quite a bit as a child?
Yes, my family has always traveled. We've had friends and family over in Israel, so we went there quite a lot, and I spent almost every vacation there. And we traveled in general. We traveled mostly by airplane, and I absolutely enjoyed it. Not the flying itself so much because I didn't pay much attention to that as a kid, but just exploring the world, seeing different cultures. It impacted my life to this day, basically just getting to know other people and their way of life. I think it's tremendously helpful, and everyone should do it.
I agree. And they always say the travel bug, once you start, it's so hard to stop. But I agree. That's the biggest reason I love traveling too. It's seeing the cultures, it's diving into the food, the smells, just the way of life. And I hope
Right.
your friends in Israel are doing okay. I know there's a lot of sadness happening over there right now.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, they're fine.
Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, with growing up and the travels you've done, did you go to university or college or straight into flight school? How did that happen?
So the way it works over in Canada and the US is that you study aviation at university or college, and it's not how it works in Europe. Here you go to flight school, which is completely separate from all the university and college stuff. In fact, we don't have colleges, we just have university. But flight schools are mostly private, so it's just a private school, and you pay for your training there. You get your license, and then you apply to get a job at an airline. That's how it works here. And the reason I say that is because it's very different from the way it works in Northern America, because usually in Northern America, you work your way up in terms of licenses. So you do your private pilot license, it's like the little propeller airplanes,
Yep.
and then you add onto that like all the other certifications and licenses that until you have like your airline pilot license. But before that, usually you have to build hours. That means you work as a flight instructor with the little airplanes just to collect as many flight hours and experience as possible to make yourself more, how do you say it, like to be more attractive as an employee for the big airlines. And most airlines require a minimum amount of hours. Here in Germany or in Europe in general, it works differently in that you go to flight school, as I said, and it really depends how many hours the airlines require. It might not be as much as the US. So it's much easier, I would say, to start flying here in Europe, not to, to say one is better than the other, but it is easier. So I started at the age of 24. And with me, it was a little different than what I described earlier, because I went to a flight school that was owned by an airline, which you see more and more these days. So a couple of airlines in Europe have their own flight schools. So they would do assessment tests before they let you in the flight school, and just make sure that you're suitable as a pilot for their airline. And then they will train you. And that's how it worked in my case.
Okay. Because I've looked into the PPL, the private pilot license out here, just to see. And my husband, he likes to fly drones, so we were curious about it, and it's something we were thinking of doing to learn more and just see. And I think it'd be incredible to be in the cockpit one day of an aircraft, even if it's just as a guest. That's fine. I don't need to fly, but that's really interesting. So, what type of requirements are they looking for if you're brand new to learning? Is there certain academics you need? Is there certain physical capabilities?
Usually your grades from school don't matter as much. A lot of people think that you have to be like super good at math and physics and everything like and all that. But at least the way it works here in Germany is they would do their own tests. So there is a thing called the DLR test. And what they do is it's a general test that a lot of airlines use for their assessments. And also some flight schools use to like assess their potential candidates. And it has multiple stages, and it's a lot about like technical understanding and maths and physics and English and all that. But there's also what we call psychomotorical skills. And that is all things like reaction time, short-term memory, 3D thinking and imagination, doing algebra in your head, all this, and also multitasking and stuff like that. So they will test you on that. And after that, that's a stage you have to pass to go to the next stage. And after that, they will check all your social skills and your behavior in terms of teamwork and problem solving, decision making, leadership too. So usually they will do interviews with you, but they will also do like group projects where they put you in a group with 5 other applicants. And it's not a competition. So if everyone is good, they will, let everyone pass, and if no one's good, they will all fail. So there's no competition in that. But usually it's a group work, and everyone in the group represents an interest, but not all interests can be met. And then you have to like negotiate. And the funny thing is that it's not at all about who wins or who will like have their interests represented, but it's about the communication and about involving everyone and how you deal with that situation. It's always also about conflict management. So they will simulate a conflict situation with you where they will get really upset and they want you to de-escalate that, which can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
And a couple of other things. So there are very many challenges and very different things that they test in order to make sure that you can do all the different things that the job in the cockpit requires, because it's a bit of a multitasking and yeah, multifaceted job.
Absolutely. And it's something I know myself and I know many of the listeners will relate to this, but it's so many things that go on up at the front that we have no idea are happening.
Hmm.
Whether exactly
Hmm.
like you said, de-escalating a situation, recalculating, evaluating how you're going to land because weather patterns have changed. Like there's so much that goes into it that we
Hmm.
just are sitting back having our drink thinking, oh, it's all lovely back here, hurry up, we're almost there, let's go. So it's
As you're
really
supposed to.
unique. Yeah, thank you. That's right. That's a sign of a good pilot. But it's a good perspective for us to have of what's going on, definitely. I do want to dive more into what it's like up at the front of the plane, but I also want to know too your own personal travels. With this
Mhm.
career, where has it taken you, whether you're at work or off work?
Up until I started working full time as an airline pilot, I used to travel quite a bit, which involved all things like from um, hotel resorts, all
Okay.
inclusive types of travels, to backpacking in Southeast Asia. I did everything. And today I tend to prefer hotel stays, like one place, and not traveling as much or not doing road trips or so. But that has to do with my job having been quite stressful the last 2 years, I would say. And the fact
Mm.
that I spend around maybe between 150 and 180 nights per year in hotels for my job
Wow.
makes traveling every day kind of less attractive for me because it
Mhm.
involves a certain amount of stress, even though it's interesting and super exciting and nice. I like to stay at one place now, um, except for one thing, which is caravan camping. I have family in the US, in Colorado, and it's so beautiful there. And they have a caravan, which I like to borrow every now and then and just, yeah, just go for a little trip and go hiking. I enjoyed that very much. So I would say
Beautiful.
I've done all pretty much all kinds of travel except for cruises, maybe. But yeah, I absolutely love it.
Do you have a place that's your favorite that you go to time and time again? Or do you like to explore different places?
I do like to explore different places, but I have this one happy place, and that is Norway. I
Mm,
absolutely love Norway. It's my favorite country in the whole world. It is so beautiful. It has so many different landscapes. The nature is just stunning there. I always keep saying it's so quiet, but the
mm.
beauty of the nature screams at you. I
Wow.
always I can't believe how people can just casually live there and just that's just their life. Like, have you seen this fjord? It's insane. Yeah, it's whenever I'm there, I just get all excited. So I've seen different sides to Norway. I've been in different
Mhm.
places there, and every time I learn something new, discover something new, and I absolutely love everything about it. It's quite expensive though, but
Beautiful.
everything else
Yeah.
is super nice. Yeah.
I've heard such beautiful things about Norway, and I cannot wait to go. My husband and I, we were
Mm-hmm.
traveling in Panama. We met a couple from
Mm-hmm.
Norway. So all the time they're like, "When you come, let us know, let us
Mm-hmm.
know." So it's on the list, the never-ending list. But what's one thing
Oh yeah.
you would say you have to do when you're there? Is there anything that really stands out for someone that's never been?
It depends on the type of person you are in terms of traveling. Oslo is my most favorite city, my favorite city in the whole world. It's really beautiful. It has such a rich culture and style also. But if you want to really explore the nature, I would recommend northern Norway. And the
Mm.
most special thing I've done so far is I've traveled to Tromsø, which is a city in the northern part of Norway, and then went north 3 hours by car. And you're at the almost at the northernmost point of Europe.
Hmm.
And the fjords there are really beautiful. Um, in winter, there's not much daylight, but I'm
Ah,
sure you kind of know that from Canada. But it's
yeah.
really, really beautiful there. The fjords are insane. There is not much population at all. And what you can do there, what is really special, if you like whales and dolphins, which I do
Mhm.
very much, You can go snorkeling with whales and dolphins in the fjord. So they
Oh,
will give you a
wow.
dry suit because it's really cold. And
Mhm.
you'll go in the water, and it's orca whales, like killer whales, which are
Wow. Yeah.
technically dolphins, but they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And they're right next to the boat. It's completely insane. It's like little dingies. You go
Wow.
out there, and they will
Yeah.
just go like jump out the water, just like dolphins.
Wow.
Unfortunately, we weren't able to go in the water that day. The only reason for that, which is, not really a problem, it was that there was a humpback whale too, which was in the group of the orcas. And I don't know if you know, but humpback whales can breach, can just jump out of the water and fall down. And that's unpredictable, and that's why we didn't have a chance to go in the water, because it was not safe. So we
Oh,
stayed on the boat, but it was the most special thing to see, because there was like an orca like 2 meters away from me, which is like 6 feet.
wow. That's
That was very special.
incredible.
So
That
that
is
you
so
can do
special.
that there. Highly recommend.
Beautiful.
Just Google it.
I didn't even think about that because we in Western Canada and off British Columbia,
Mhm.
Vancouver Island is known for whale watching,
Right,
orcas,
right.
humpbacks.
Hmm.
And I actually went in March to go on a whale watching tour and I didn't see
Hmm.
anything. We saw some dolphins, which was
Hmm.
really cool, but that's on my list to be able to see orcas.
Hmm.
That is very important. What a cool experience. Ooh,
Yeah, and the
love that.
waters, it's crystal clear because it's so cold there in the fjord. It has this
Yeah.
etherical purity to it, and they all have this wild salmon that they eat there, that they feed on in the fjords. So
Yeah.
they're always almost always there in winter. So you have to go in
Wow.
winter though. Normal
Yeah,
winter.
okay. Good to know. That's really good to know. See, now you're making me want to go to Norway even more now. So it's just it keeps piling on all these destinations.
10 out of 10
Uh,
recommend. Yeah.
yeah, love that. With all the travels that you've done, what is one travel tip that you swear by? Is there a product that you always have to have, a pillow you need to use? What is it that you bring with you on every trip that provides comfort or it's just for fun? Is there anything that pops into your mind?
I always bring my own pillowcase, which is a silken pillowcase for my
Mhm.
mainly my hair and my skin, and it gives me that comfy feeling. Also, I always bring, like when I'm on the road, I always bring tissues, hand sanitizer, and sunglasses. No matter how bright or dark it is outside, I always need sunglasses.
Mhm.
And one routine I've established over the years, especially with my hotel stays for work, is that no matter the time I go to bed, and no matter how short the night's going to be, I always tidy up my room and my space before I go to bed. And especially when you are on a road trip or you are in another hotel every night, it makes sense to put your stuff always in the same place, like to
Oh,
establish
smart.
routines, so you don't have to like look all over the room to collect your stuff again. So I tend to put all my clothes in the same space and all my documents in the same space in every
Mhm.
hotel room. And of course, not every hotel room is the same, but there's usually always a desk, for example. So
Yeah.
documents go on the desk and stuff like that. And that makes it really easy to get your stuff ready the next day, even especially if you're time critical. So that's one
Yeah.
thing I would recommend too. Mhm.
Great advice. Something that's so simple that I don't think of, and I travel quite a bit for work, locally
Mhm.
within Canada. But you're bang on with that. I've never thought about that because in the morning I'm always like, okay, I have to do my rounds,
Mhm.
make sure I don't forget
Mhm.
anything. But if everything's in the same spot, good
Oh,
trick.
and
I like it. Mhm.
thank you. And one more thing that comes to mind, just now that you say it, what a lot of pilots do and cabin crew do too. You know how you buy your own meals or do meal prep and then forget your stuff in the fridge when you leave the hotel room? That happens a lot, or happened a lot with me. What I do to prevent that from happening is that I put one shoe of the shoes I'm going to wear the next day near the fridge or on top of the fridge. So there's no
Oh,
way you will leave your hotel room without your shoes on. And that's how you remember.
yes.
It sounds stupid, but it really helps me.
It sounds stupid, but it's simple. That's the key,
Right,
right?
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
Keep it
that's
simple.
actually
Yeah.
A good question. How do you do meal prep when you're on the road and in all these foreign countries and other places? That's got to be so hard.
Oh, Raquel, it is hard.
Yeah.
It is a challenge, absolutely, because not every airport is the same, not every city is the same. You always have to go explore where to find healthy food because that's what I enjoy most. Also,
Yeah.
I'm vegetarian and I try to eat plant-based as much as I can, which doesn't make it any easier. But
Hmm.
there are also some things I bring from home, which is I always bring breakfast because I tend to have muesli for breakfast. So I do my own little mix of like
Yeah.
oats and flaxseed and all that, and dried fruits. And then I bring almond milk, and it's both just in my suitcase ready to go. And
Yeah.
that's how I always cover the breakfast. So that is safe, and I don't have to worry
Yes.
about that. And that's a good start into the day. And
Yeah.
everything else, I just have to like improvise as everyone else.
Oh, it's true. Good for you. And that's the whole thing, being prepared, right? Like that's where
Right.
the best way to do it, that you're not going to start reaching for the junk and the easy quick fix, right?
That's right. The more you can bring
Yeah.
from home. I mean, obviously, when you're on a trip, it might not be the easiest thing to do, but also
Yeah.
like they have really healthy canned foods too these days. So it's not
Oh,
all
that's
trash
true.
that's canned. So yeah.
Yeah, very true. Interesting. I mean, circling back to being or going through all of the training and everything as a pilot,
Mm-hmm.
I know as we discussed, or I mentioned when talking about the intro for you with your Instagram, you
Mm-hmm.
really are a huge advocate for women in aviation and the representation. I
Mm-hmm.
absolutely love looking at the reels that you put out and the motivation, because it is really inspiring. And it's something growing up, I never thought that I could be a pilot. It's just something we inherently automatically think that, oh, well, that's a man that would do that, or, that's
Right.
more suited for a male because they're way more, or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the reason is. So
Right.
how did you find school when you were in school? Were you, one of the few women? Were there other women in schooling and class that when you were training?
There were other women. In fact, in my class consisted of 23 students. We had 5 women, which was a lot. All the other
Wow.
classes had
Yeah.
only like 2 women or so, definitely below 10%. And my class was a little bit of an exception, but still, it was very few. And as you said earlier, the numbers are still remarkably low. And I really thought about it for a long time why that is, and I've been thinking about it for years now, and I can't really come to a conclusion other that it's a lack of role models and a lack of representation.
Mm,
Because I mentioned that DLR test earlier, and we know from that and also from studies that there is no difference in competency and in performance in these tests among men and women. So that's not a factor. And also, from what I know, there is no difference in terms of accessibility.
mhm.
So the only thing I can come up with that makes a difference is one, self confidence or lack thereof, and the lack of representation and role models. And that's what I tried to do with my Instagram that you just mentioned, to
Mhm.
help change that a little bit, because we are out there. There are women in these male dominated fields, not only in aviation, but in other fields too. But I think it can make a huge difference, whether when you have a dream or that one thing that you want to do later on, and you don't ever see anyone remotely resembling you or looking like you or
Mhm.
talking like you, whatever, dressing like you, that can make a huge difference, because you need to see yourself in somebody in order to think that this is for you. It takes a really, really strong mind to do that without it.
Yeah.
And I think it can't be overstated how important role models are, or mentors are. Just someone you can ask questions. It can make such a huge difference for someone who has no idea where to start.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. It's bang on, not just for aviation, but for so many different industries. whether it's corporate and business, whether it's in
Mm-hmm.
tourism, representation is huge on all levels. And I think it's something that more and more now we are talking about. And it's something that is slowly changing. And I ended
Mm-hmm.
up seeing these stats, and there was an article that you were interviewed in as well, just
Mm-hmm.
talking about how the change has happened over the years, and it's slowly increasing for commercial pilots that
Right.
are female. And I think right now we're hovering around 5% of our
Mm-hmm.
women,
Mm-hmm.
which is more than, I think it was 2016. It was at 3 point something. So it's
Mm-hmm.
changing in the right direction, I guess. And you're right. How how else can we support this change? You know, you are doing a great job with advocating, and I know not
Mm-hmm.
all people are, you know, that open to putting things on social media or talking about it. But
Mm-hmm.
is there anything you can think of that airlines can do or airports can do that will help this advocacy?
There are a lot of programs in place these days, either by airlines or by scholarship programs that promote women in aviation. It's still a very slow change, I think. It could be
Yeah.
quicker, faster, but at least the needle is moving in the right direction. I think the issue that we have is more complex because it's more of a societal issue. It's about
Mhm.
these little doubts that you are faced with when you have the wish to go into a male-dominated field, for example, as a woman, or
Yeah.
maybe as a like person of color going into a more white-dominated field. What it doesn't matter
Hmm.
if you're a minority, people will
Hmm.
tend to ask more questions. Like, say you were to work in engineering, and people would ask a man and he would say, I'm an engineering, there would be not many questions asked. But if
Hmm.
you were to say the same thing, people would ask questions, and maybe out of sheer interest and goodwill, but a lot of questions would maybe not when you have the job, but when you aspire to become one, people would
Hmm.
tend to ask more questions. And um, these are the subtle things that make you doubt yourself more, because these are things that you perceive as a little kid, especially as a little
Hmm.
girl. And there's this how do you say it, this message that you get over and over again without anyone saying anything to your face. It's just this, okay,
Yeah.
that's unusual, okay, why would you do that? These little things that make you at least feel that it's abnormal or it's an
Yeah.
atypical thing to do.
Yeah.
And that's what makes you question it more. So we need to get rid of that as a society as a whole, I think, and just dissolve these stereotypes, because there's
Yeah.
no such thing really. I mean, it's all in our heads, and not even in all heads because it's not in ours, right? So we know
Yeah.
what women can do. I mean, you're a woman, I'm a woman.
I
Have you
know.
met women? We do it all the time. We work hard. We're so
Yeah.
used to like hustling and working hard in silence
Yes.
without anyone noticing. The potential is huge. And
Hmm.
I would wish for 16-year-old girls to know that, to know their true potential.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Yeah.
I agree. And the more women I speak to on these podcasts, the more I realize a lot of it is that the self-doubt creeps up in all of us, no matter what. It happens to
Mm-hmm.
men, it happens to all identities. Self-doubt is real. Imposter syndrome is a real thing. Thinking that, you know, you hear one little comment, and then all of a sudden now it's in your brain that it's something you shouldn't or
Right.
maybe shouldn't do. Oh, that was a silly idea. Why did I even think of that? And I know on your Instagram, you talk about imposter syndrome and
Mm-hmm.
some ways to overcome it. How has that been affected in your life? And what are some tips you can give all of us for that emotion that comes up?
Oh yeah, that imposter syndrome. That is, yeah, quite a story. One thing, oh sorry about that. One thing that
Hmm.
comes to mind now that you say, because that's a really good point, with yeah, like how can we make young girls feel more comfortable achieving their goals?
Hmm.
One thing that just I forgot to mention is we should stop asking girls how their plans will work out with family planning, because
Mm.
that's what girls get asked all the time, as if it's
Yes.
their
Yes.
job and only
Mm-hmm.
their job to make it
Mm-hmm.
work, like all that family thing. And guys never get that question. I know that for a fact. And
Yeah.
that's a huge difference too, because I have these little girls asking me on Instagram, yeah, I want to become a pilot so bad, but how do I, can I have a family when, because my parents are worried. And I hate that. I hate
Yeah.
when parents prevent you from doing that because they think you should rather have a family, because that's your own choice, either to have kids or
Yeah.
not to, which is fine.
Yeah.
And also, it's
Yeah.
not your job to figure it out on your own, period. Sorry
Mm-hmm.
about that. I just needed to add that
No,
because
that is a great point. And you are so bang on. And I actually was having a conversation with someone recently at my
mm-hmm,
work, and she's saying that she's even getting into it as a mother. She's trying to catch herself on how she interacts with her son and her daughter, because she
mm-hmm,
notices that for her son, she'll be like, "Good job, you can do it. Great idea you had, great thought." Where her
mm-hmm.
daughter, she's like, "Oh, you're so pretty. Look at the
Right,
beautiful dress you're wearing." And she's
right,
catching herself being like, why am I doing that? Like,
yeah,
I want both of them. And I want to let my son know he's very pretty too. I want to
right,
let my daughter know that she can do it and her thoughts are valid. So
mm-hmm.
I agree with you. It starts, oh man, with a whole perspective or a shift that we all need to do.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there. And I think
Yeah.
we're all guilty of that to some degree, because it's so
Huge. Yeah.
normalized to call little
Hmm.
girls pretty and to call little boys smart.
Yep.
And yeah,
Yeah.
just to be aware of that really helps, because you know, every time you say it, you question yourself and maybe change it. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But yeah, that's a
Yeah.
bigger issue. I think it's not only for the field of
Hmm.
aviation. It goes, I mean, every single woman
Yeah.
I've talked to can relate. And that says
Yes.
a lot. So yeah.
Yeah.
Now for the, sorry,
Mhm. Yeah.
now
For
for the
imposter syndrome.
imposter syndrome, yeah, you asked about
Yeah.
earlier. So imposter syndrome, and I don't know if anyone, everyone is aware of the definition. That's a psychological phenomenon that basically tells you that you're not really competent in what you do, but you've kind of cheated your way up. And at some point, everyone will notice that you can't
Mm.
do anything and you don't know anything, and the truth will all come out. And that's a constant fear that a lot of people feel. It's completely irrational. It's, as I said, it's just
Yeah.
a phenomenon that happens in your head, and it's completely detached from reality. It has nothing to do with your skills.
Mhm.
But a lot of people feel that, and it makes you feel like you don't belong and you're not worthy of what you do. And I've felt that, like, all those years. I felt that as a young girl, and I still feel it now every now and then. That's why I made the reel
Mhm.
about it on Instagram, because I think we
Yeah.
need to normalize it, and there are various ways to cope with it.
Thank you to this episode's sponsor, Kentucky Holidays. Let me tell you, I'm speaking from experience. I have traveled on these tours, and I have seen the world in a group setting and made lifelong friends because of it. Check out the link in the episode description so you can find out their last-minute deals, their promotions, and where they can take you around the world. You do not want to miss it, and you will have no regrets. Happy travels.
For me, the immediate effect of feeling that way is that the positive thing is that I will work really hard and try my absolute best to perform well, which I kind of always do, but it's a more toxic way of like motivating myself. But the
Yeah.
negative thing about it is that I will only allow the best version of myself to show up for the job that I'm doing, which sounds nice, but it's really not,
Mhm.
because you don't always have your best day. You have
Yeah.
bad days too, right? And
Yeah.
I think people who don't tend to have imposters so much, they will allow themselves a bad day, and they are fine with saying to themselves, well, today I didn't perform that well. Well, it happens. And I never
Yeah.
had that. I wish I would have that um that softness within me to be gentle with myself. And
Mm.
that's something that really needs practice. And it puts you under a lot of pressure if you experience that imposter syndrome a lot. But over the years, I've learned that there are a couple of measures that really help me through it. And that's what I mentioned in the reel. One thing is rationalizing it. which means that you really maybe say it out loud to yourself. It is my head lying to me. It is a psychological effect that is not the truth. That is my head lying to me, trying to tell me that I'm not good enough, while I am good enough. So just rationalizing it and calling it what it is, which is not the truth, far from the truth. The second thing is the rationalizing helps with demystifying it, because it becomes smaller. It's not this big, huge, creepy thing anymore, but it's still a feeling, and feelings are irrational by nature, right? So you can make the feeling of not being enough go away by just rationalizing it in your head. So I've learned that if you let the feeling come and stay for a little bit, not too long, but stay for a little bit and make room for it, it will go away by itself. So that helps a lot. And the third thing, it works for me. I'm not sure if it works for everyone else, but for me, any type of movement or working out, sports, exercise really helps a lot to get that tension out of my nervous system and regain my self-confidence. And that helps a lot, because when I come back from a long run or so, I'm a completely different person. So that helps too.
Thank you for sharing that. It's something that's not talked about often enough, I don't think, for something that a lot of people do get, but it's really good advice that you have given. And I agree with you. It's the giving ourselves the grace and allowing ourselves to feel that way, and knowing that this will pass and it's not reality. It doesn't, this is not, I hear you exactly on that, because it's so easy to have those little, I always say it's like this little voice of doubt that creeps up. And if you listen for it too long, it can be paralyzing. So and you're right, it's practice. It is practice over and over and retraining your brain. So has there ever been a situation, as you're in control of an aircraft, has there ever been a situation where you've needed to practice those while you're up in the air? Or has there been any type of situation that, or when you fly, is everything, more calculated and structured, that it's more of a space of calm? How is that space for you?
I would tend to say the latter. I think when I'm at work, I'm more like in work mode, which makes me just work on things, being hyper focused and doing stuff. And it very rarely occurs that in these moments, imposter syndrome will start in my head, because usually there's not much capacity for me to even think about it at work. And usually the best thing that for me that can happen at work is being in that flow state, where the thing that you do and the tasks that you perform are neither too boring, not too challenging, but just that sweet spot in the middle where you can handle everything, but at the same time you're enjoying it so much, but you're still focused. That flow state is the perfect thing. And it doesn't happen every day, but it happens often enough for me to absolutely enjoy work. So to put it short, I'm usually in a different mode, and the overthinking happens more at home or when I'm studying or training. But yeah, I think it needs to be like normalized more. But up in the air, I'm just doing my thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you're flying. I find a sense of peace. I know there's a lot of people that get very scared when they're in an aircraft, but I've always found it very peaceful up there. There's way less distractions. You can of course watch a movie if you want. I get very inspired and creative when I'm in the air. What would you say, is there any tips you can give people that are nervous flyers to help bring a little bit of calmness to their mind?
Absolutely. So the first thing I would recommend if you're a nervous flyer, I mean, the one thing most people are terrified of if they're nervous flyers is turbulence. So one thing I would love for them to know is that turbulence is not dangerous, especially in the countries we live in. I know it can get bumpy and that can be scary, but it's really more of a comfort thing than it is a safety issue. And the planes we fly in can handle much more than us humans can. We tend to get sick all the time, but the airplanes, don't even start to stress out over that. So they're made for much heavier stuff to happen. And so the bumpiness and the turbulence can be scary, but I always put it this way when I do passenger announcement. It's like driving on a bumpy road, or driving like through a meadow, or where it gets really bumpy, and that's really all that happens. And us two in the front, we just worry about our coffee or tea getting spilled. That's really the only concern. So
okay, that's good.
Yeah, it is. And I wish that more people would know that. I know it's still an irrational fear, as I said. So rational arguments don't help in every case. But one more thing that I would really recommend, other than knowing about that, is when you're a nervous flyer and you have to take a flight, during boarding, let the cabin crew know that you're a nervous flyer, because it really helps. One, they become aware of you and they know where you're sitting, and they can take care of you or look after you during flight, which can really help. Two, you can always ask to say hi to the pilots during boarding, or even during deboarding after the flight. Sometimes we're too busy for that. The cabin crew will always check with us and ask, but in most cases, that's absolutely possible, just to come in for a quick chat. And that can be a complete game changer. I'm doing it all the time, and I've seen so many nervous flyers just having a casual conversation with us. It doesn't even have to be about flying or cockpit or whatever, or their fear. It can be just a casual conversation, and just seeing them, seeing us being humans, who are just regular people like you and me, being at work and doing what they do, really helps, because it creates that personal connection. It's human to human, just having a connection there. So that really helps from my experience. So I would definitely recommend that.
Great advice. Great advice. Because it's true. It happens quite often. Yeah, it always happens. I see it a lot. I hear it. And even with the turbulence, I had one time where we had really bad weather going into Toronto, and we had to circle because they couldn't land. And it was a red eye. So we were sleeping, and the woman next to me, like as we started to go down and then we had to come back up, she like freaked out. She screamed, she grabbed my arm, and I looked at her. I was like, what's going on? And then she's like, anyways, I had to help calm her down. But it's always one of those things that I feel like you can't crash with air. So as long as, as long as we're still in the air, we're good to go.
That's right. You're right with that. But at the same time, when that fear takes over, and these people, they go through hell, and I feel so sorry for them, because they must feel horrible. And that's why I say, please let the cabin crew know when you're getting on board that you're a nervous flyer, because not only will it make them aware of you and be able to help you, but also you can use them as a resource. They fly all the time. Ask them, anything I can do, any tips, because they are the pros. They see it all the time. So and different people have different strategies to cope. Some take medication, some drink or whatever. I'm not giving any recommendations there, because I think it's very individual. It differs from person to person what helps. But just let people know, because I know it might feel embarrassing, but it's really not, because everyone has been there, and so many people are, and it can really help you.
Yes, I definitely agree with you. When it comes to all aspects of being on the aircraft, I do want to know, what has there been anything that's been the hardest that you've experienced, becoming a pilot or while flying? What has that journey been like for you?
I think the pressure that you experience throughout your training is a challenge like no other. And I say that because usually when you do flight training, you're quite a young person. You don't have as much experience like in life, and you tend to be insecure by nature. And there's an immense amount of pressure that you have to be able to handle. And the reason for that is that there's a vast amount of resources and money that goes into flight training. It's really expensive, and it's very expensive to operate planes. it's very expensive to pay flight instructors and for all the infrastructure to work around it. And that's why there's like this syllabus for every flight lesson, which means there's a list of things that you will be taught during that very lesson. And it will maybe be taught again the next lesson, and then it will be checked. So there's really not much time for you to learn new stuff. And you will always have that perception of just barely figuring it out and then on to the next thing. So that's something you have to live with. And also that's not reality, because the truth is that you tend to perform really well. You just never feel that, because there's always that next thing that needs to be learned. And that pressure doesn't go away through training. And you really need to find a way for yourself to cope with that. And the good thing about it, as much as we all hate this pressure and this doubt that goes along with it, is that it teaches you resilience. And that's something that you need as a pilot. That is a key skill, that resilience, that ability to drop the thought, drop any negative experience, and just focus on the next task ahead and just do your best, no matter what the past experience has been like. And to stay focused, no matter what your own perception of your own performance is or anything. So you might think that you perform bad, but don't let that impact your future performance. So that's really a key skill. And if you think about it, and I feel that a lot of student pilots are not aware of that is actually on a kind of a meta level the number one lesson you learn in flight school, because that's what pilots need the most, that ability to perform under pressure and to perform well when things do not go as planned, because that's when you need them the most, to be focused and to, push on through, to solve a problem, to be creative, to come up with a plan, to come up with a solution. And you don't need people who just give up and say, you know what, screw it, I'm out. You don't need these kind of people. And that's that key skill that you learn in flight school. So I would say that was my most important lesson, but also my biggest challenge.
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. And another perspective that you don't think about. You just trust that they know what they're doing, but you also trust that they've logged their hours, they understand the aircraft, but there's so much more that comes to it. Wow. I do, I did ask on Instagram to see if anybody had any questions. I did get
Oh
a
yeah,
few
sure.
questions, that came up. So
I'm excited.
I know there's some good ones in here too. Okay, this one I love. This one's from the Frequency Farm on Instagram. Have you ever seen any unexplained sights in the sky?
Oh,
Yeah.
I think they're referring to UFOs,
I
maybe.
think so.
Um,
Yep.
I personally haven't, but I've heard of it. I've heard of other pilots seeing
Okay.
it.
Other pilots. Interesting. Ooh, very interesting. Another one is from Robin SG, which I feel like we went over. They were just wanting to know more the way to become a commercial pilot, which I feel like we really
Mm-hmm.
touched upon well in
Mm-hmm.
here. So hopefully that answered Robin's question.
Mm-hmm.
Roy Rodriguez Oficial. Do pilots listen to music in the air?
No, they don't.
No,
I've heard
okay.
pilots of little propeller planes do that, like the private pilots. And you
Yeah,
could technically do that, but of course, up in the air, we're not allowed, and it would be very unprofessional to do so. So we don't.
to do it. I figured, but it was a good question. I was like, good one. I'm gonna
Absolutely. I
find out,
appreciate it.
right?
That's a great
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, Another one. Where did this one go? What has been, this is from Rita Candy Corn, what has been the most surprising thing of your flight journey, or something you didn't know that you really thought, oh wow, that's, a surprising thing that the pilots do, or that's occurred while you've been flying?
Mm, gonna have to think about that. A surprising thing. Well, I guess during flight school, I didn't know any cabin crew. And I was really surprised when I started out flying how well trained they are, because they are so well trained in so many different areas. They are pros in terms of first aid and first responders. So there's a statistic that came out in Germany that it says it's 7 times more likely that you die from a heart attack when it occurs at the mall as opposed to in an aircraft, just due to the work of the flight attendants alone. I mean, of course, there are always oftentimes doctors on board that can help too.
Yeah.
But the amount of resources they have on board, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but there's a lot of resources they can use should there be an emergency, and the level of training that they have. I mean, they never get enough credit for their work, obviously. Yeah. And I wish more people would recognize what they're doing, and that's not about serving drinks. But yeah, that's something that was really surprising to me in a good way, that you can really rely on them. Yeah.
Interesting. And I did an interview with a woman that used to be a flight attendant for many years with WestJet. And she did talk about the training as well, and just how intense it is. And it's rigorous, but it's something you need to do and you have to understand. And I agree. I don't think they get enough credit. I don't think, I know pilots get obviously a ton of credit because they're the ones in control of the aircraft. But I agree, it's a team effort. Without all of them, without the people at the airport to get us on and off the aircraft, it is a whole team effort. Absolutely. Another question for you. What's your favorite city to fly into or out of?
My favorite city? Wow, that's a tough one. You mean in terms of the city because I like the city, or you mean in terms of the airport?
The view going in or out, like what you see from the cockpit.
I would say definitely the Greek islands. They are on top of that list, like Corfu or Crete or Rhodos, and all these little islands, because the view is just breathtaking. And usually the Mediterranean Sea doesn't tend to be as rich in color as, for example, the Caribbean is, but it looks very Caribbean there. You have these little lagoons and this bright blue water. It's just breathtaking. You really have to focus on the landing and remember not to look out as much. But yeah, the Greek islands are really beautiful. What else? Anything that's everything that's mountainous, I would say. So I've flown to Innsbruck in Austria, which is a very challenging airport. It's located right in the Inn Valley, which is surrounded by very mountainous terrain. And it's very challenging to go there, but at the same time, it's so beautiful in winter. You have all the snow-covered tops, and it's a hotspot for like winter sports and skiing. It's really beautiful too. So there are a lot of breathtaking views. Some of my colleagues, I feel, get used to it at some point, and I don't judge them. But to me, even 10 years in, I feel like a kid in the candy store every time I look out. It's just amazing.
Love it. Well, it's best view on the aircraft, the best view. The 3 stripes. What's the representation on or the meaning rather of your 3 stripes on your pilot uniform that you're wearing?
This three stripes means that it's my rank. I'm in the rank of a first officer. The captain has 4 stripes. That's how you can tell one from the other. I'm sitting in the right-hand seat in the cockpit, and the captain will sit in the left-hand seat. There are the terms pilot and co-pilot, which are rather outdated. And the reason I say this is because back like 50 years ago, at least decades ago, you had a different culture in terms of hierarchy in the cockpit. You would usually have one pilot, which was the captain, and I would say he or she, but usually it was him back then. There were not many women, or close to none, would make every decision like on themselves. Like there would be no cooperation or anything. So the co-pilot, as they used to call it, would be more of an assistant, and he or she would not fly that much or anything, was just there to, I don't even know what their job was back then. But today the culture has changed so much. Today it's just much more liberal, because one, we take turns in terms of flying. So I will fly just as many legs as the captain will. So that's one thing a lot of people are not aware of, that as co-pilots do fly a lot. And the second thing is that we make all decisions together. Of course, he or she will have like the final say should we disagree, which almost never happens. But other than that, it's really a team effort, as you put it. And that's why we don't really like the term co-pilot and pilot as much, because it suggests that the co-pilot is not really a pilot, but I refer to my job as being a pilot. So every first officer is a fully qualified pilot, and that's why we tend to prefer the terms first officer and captain, but I don't expect anyone to keep that in mind. So just so
it's good to understand. Know. Yeah, very good.
So this is first officer.
First officer. And when you're in the air, how often are you using autopilot typically versus flying? Is there a certain ratio, or does it depend on the route and the length? How does that work?
It does depend on the route and the length. We use the autopilot for the majority of the flight time. And the reason for that is that we then have our hands free to do other stuff, which is more important stuff than just to fly in a straight line. And I'd say that about 80% of what we do up there is what we call threat and error management. So we will anticipate what will happen next. We will go through the next steps in our mind, and we will prepare for that and come up with a plan B or C, just in case things don't go as planned. That's our main job up there. It's not flying like straight and level. So we will, for example, check the weather at our destination airport, check the weather at the alternate airport. Should there be anything wrong with our destination airport, we will check, we will log like the flight hours, do all the paperwork that needs to be done in a flight. We will start thinking about other risks that can always occur. We will check particular things about the airport that we fly to. We usually do that on the ground before we start the flight, but there are always some things that differ from airport to airport, and that's what we call NOTAMs. It's called Notice to Airmen. It's little notes that get updated on a regular basis, and it just will tell you if there's any particularities. For example, runway closures because there's construction work in progress or stuff like that. And of course, we check that before we start the flight, just as I said, but we will review it in flight, for example, just to be fully prepared. And all this stuff, or talking to the cabin too. So there's a lot of administrative things or organizational things that happen. And most of it is in place or is there to prevent any risk in the future. And that's why we manage these risks, by preparing and coming up with, as I said, plans B and C. So it would be really, it would not be helpful to have your hands full with flying the plane when an automated system can do that. Of course, we always monitor that the autopilot is doing everything correctly. We check that all the time. We have our eyes there all the time. So we could always take over in case something went wrong, but it never does. And it's really a resource that helps a lot.
I didn't know that. I didn't know at what point, like I imagine for takeoff and landing, that's you guys up there and gals. And then that makes sense for what you guys are doing up there the rest of the time. I hope a lot of people listening understand that you're always working up there. There's no music. There's no, well, I'm sure on the long flights, there's probably a little bit of a nap area you could have where one could go, the captain could, first officer switch just to get some sleep.
That's right. Yeah. We are allowed to nap within a certain like frame of rules, obviously, but on long haul flights where there are, for example, 3 pilots in the cockpit, they would take turns, and they have, I don't know if people know this, but we have these little bedrooms on board of long haul planes where the crew can actually lay down in a bed, and
Nice.
they have seatbelts there too for them. But you can, in fact, have on a long haul flight, you can easily have a 3-hour break that has been
Nice.
planned ahead, and then really sleep on the plane.
Good.
So that's almost just scheduled. So they expect you
Yeah.
to do that too, just to get some rest.
Yeah, very important. One fun question. If
Sure.
I've seen inside the cockpit, I've seen all the
Mm-hmm.
buttons and the levers and everything. Is there one
Mm-hmm.
button that you think is the most important in that cockpit?
One button that's the most important.
Mhm.
Wow.
There's so many, there's thousands. So I don't even know.
There's well, yeah. I'm just thinking because they have so many different. They do so many different things. There's like groups of
Mhm.
buttons that do different things. So of course we have what's in the Airbus called the side stick. In a Boeing plane, it would be called the yoke, like the steering wheel.
Okay.
That's pretty important. You have the thrust levers or throttles
Yeah.
for the engine power. I would consider that very important. Um,
There's a lot.
some people would make fun of being the little bell. Well, we can call the flight attendants to be the most
Ooh.
important because they will order a lot of coffee. I personally don't drink coffee, but I like to talk to them a lot. So yeah, there's not one little switch, but a lot of them that are important.
A lot.
Yeah.
Oh, too funny. Too funny. Well, if for one last question, what would you say to, or what's actually no, let's go with this question. What is the best piece of advice that you've received throughout your career?
It's a tough one because I've received so much great advice. Um, it's um, it's not a particular person who told me this. It's more of a general rule in aviation. And the first thing that every pilot learns, and it's called fly the aircraft. That's like the big rule that is above everything else, because usually when something goes wrong in the cockpit, which we always train for, but very rarely ever happens, just to say that, the people tend to be overwhelmed and be confused and startled and surprised. And that's where that rule comes to mind, to say, keep it simple, fly the aircraft, which means make sure that the airplane flies and doesn't fall out of the sky.
Yeah.
And it sounds very easy. And in fact, it is not that hard. It's really simple. The failure can be very complex and the malfunction can be very maybe hard to wrap your head around or whatever. But keeping the airplane flying is something that is almost always possible in one way or the other. And it's just a few steps that need to be taken. And I love that quote. In fact, I have it on my bracelet here in my hand.
Oh, wow.
It says fly the air. Yeah, it's a Taylor Swift bracelet because I'm
Like
Swiftie. But it says fly the aircraft because I love how that quote translates to real life too. And I love understanding it the way that you need to take care of yourself first. You need to make sure that your own aircraft flies. You need to make your aircraft stay in the sky first before you can do anything else. And in terms of self-care and showing up for yourself, I love that quote very much, because no matter what the outside noise is, and life is always busy and there's so much stuff happening around us, just take a breath and fly the aircraft. And that always helps just to get things going, but also prioritize what's important.
Well said, and great advice to carry with you on, off the aircraft, in life. Very well said. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for your insight, for being able to pick your brain on how this whole career of yours and this journey and this passion for aviation has come to be. I know this has inspired me. It's inspired many, and there's a lot of things that I did not know, and I'm going to make sure a lot of people know now. So that is important. Where can everybody find you?
I'm on Instagram. My Instagram is Raya in the Sky. That's Raja in the Sky with all underscores in between.
Perfect. Well, make sure to tag. I'll put everything in the comments as well. And again, appreciate your time and what you're doing. Keep advocating for all the women out there, the sisters, the daughters, everyone, just to know that being a pilot, being a first officer, being a captain is within their capability. They just have to go for it. So thank you again.
That's right. Thank you so much, Raquel, for inviting me on. It's been a lot of fun talking to you. And thanks for everyone for listening.
If you like this episode, please subscribe, download a few more, and leave a review. I really would love to hear from you, what you enjoyed and what your key takeaways were. And of course, please let me know if there's any aspect of the travel industry you want me to talk about next. You can also search for the hashtag SheDaresToTravel podcast on Instagram and comment on the episode's post with your questions. I'd love to answer them all for you guys. I hope you enjoy your day, stay so well, and until next time, fly straight.